Up next, we'll go live to the floor of the U.S. House of Representatives, where members of the House and Senate are now convening to receive a message from President Bush. The President will address the joint session of Congress about the situation in the Persian Gulf. And after his remarks, we expect to hear from Democratic leaders about their positions on U.S. policy in the region. The last time the President convened a joint session of Congress was in February to deliver his budget message to Congress.
Screen is a live picture from the U.S. House of Representatives. Members of the diplomatic corps have just been announced and are filing down the center aisle, waiting the arrival of the president for what will be his third appearance inside this chamber since being inaugurated as president on January the 20th, 1989. Previously, he has addressed a joint session of Congress back in February of 1989 on his budget proposal at that time. Again, his State of the Union message on January the 31st, 1990. And tonight's special joint session of Congress called for the President to address the nation and the Congress about the situation in the Persian Gulf. Senate and members of the House are milling about the floor, waiting the arrival of the President. The committee selected by both the House and the Senate to go escort the President to the chamber has been appointed, and they've left the chamber. According to the official record, this is the President's official trip number 11 to Capitol Hill since he's been president. The list put out earlier today includes things like, obviously, the inauguration back in 1989, early in the year, but also a number of social occasions. Matter of fact, one of the more interesting things on the list are 3 special social luncheons with Representatives Sonny Montgomery of Mississippi, John Paul Hammerschmidt of Arkansas. He had lunch with them on March 13th, 1989, September 11th, 1989, and February the 4th, 1990. Speaker's dining room. C-SPAN's coverage tonight will include the President's live address in just a few moments, followed by a brief break for 3 or 4 minutes until Congressman Richard Gephardt, the Majority Leader of the House, gives a Democratic response. The President's speech is expected to last from 35 to 45 minutes, depending on the applause, and the Democratic response is expected to last somewhere in the vicinity of 10 minutes. Following Mr. Gephardt's address, we will open the phones for several minutes to get your reaction to this evening's comments from the President, Mr. Gephardt. And then we will hear during the time allotted later this evening from members of Congress and also members of the Senate about their reaction. We have cameras over in what's called Statuary Hall, which is located right off the House chamber. Getting started a little bit late. This evening, I might point out that the ambassador from Iraq to the United States, Ambassador Mohammed Al-Mashad, has already arrived in the chamber and will be present for the next speech. The joint session of Congress is more formal than what's called a joint meeting. Joint sessions occur upon the adoption by each house what they call a concurrent resolution. Joint meetings occur when they reach what's called a unanimous consent agreement to recess to meet with the other legislative body. Speaker Tom Foley is in the chair there, right below the flag. Seated to his right, your left, is the Vice President. Not appear yet that the President's cabinet has yet arrived. The list we have is correct. The only member of the cabinet who will be missing tonight is the Attorney General. On the list tonight, Jim Brady, the Secretary of State, who's going to go to Syria on Thursday. President Assad of Syria. Nicholas Brady, the Secretary of the Treasury, who just returned a few days ago from an around-the-world trip, soliciting support and funds from American allies for the situation in the Gulf. Richard Cheney, the Secretary of Defense, who testified earlier today before the Senate Armed Services Committee about the situation in the Gulf. Clayton Yiders, the Secretary of Agriculture. Elizabeth Dole, Secretary of Labor. Sam Skinner, Secretary of Transportation. Well, Lujan, the Secretary of Interior. Should be able to see some of these folks on your screen here in a few moments. Laura Cavazos, the Secretary of Education. James Watkins, Secretary of Energy. Actually, there was the Attorney General, Dick Thornburgh, so he is there tonight. He wasn't on the advance list. Clayton Yiders, the Secretary of Agriculture, back to us. Kemp is back to us, the Secretary of HUD, talking very briefly with Senator Fritz Hollings of South Carolina, shaking hands with John Glenn. Louis Sullivan, the Secretary of HHS, Health and Human Services. The President's speech is expected to last between 35 and 45 minutes, depending on the applause. And that will be followed a few minutes after that by a speech by Congressman Richard Gephardt, Dick Gephardt, who is the majority leader, who will be responding for the Democrats. His speech is expected to be about 10 minutes long.
Members of the Congress, I have the high privilege and distinct honor of presenting to you the President of the United States.
President, Mr. Speaker, and members of the United States Congress, distinguished guests, fellow Americans, thank you very much for that warm welcome. We gather tonight, witness to events in the Persian Gulf as significant as they are tragic. In the early morning hours of August 2nd, following negotiations and promises by Iraq's dictator, Saddam Hussein, not to use force, a powerful Iraqi army invaded its trusting and much weaker neighbor, Kuwait. Within 3 days, 120,000 Iraqi troops with 850 tanks had poured into Kuwait and moved south to threaten Saudi Arabia. It was then that I decided to act to check that aggression. At this moment, our brave servicemen and women stand watch in that distant desert and on distant seas, side by side with the forces of more than 20 other nations. They are some of the finest men and women of the United States of America, and they're doing one terrific job. These valiant Americans were ready at a moment's notice to leave their spouses and their children to serve on the front line halfway around the world. And they remind us who keeps America strong? They do. And in the trying circumstances of the Gulf, the morale of our servicemen and women is excellent. In the face of danger, they are brave, they're well-trained, and dedicated. A soldier, Private First Class Wade Merritt of Knoxville, Tennessee, now stationed in Saudi Arabia, wrote his parents of his worries, his love of family, and his hope for peace. But Wade also wrote, "I am proud of my country and its firm stance against inhumane aggression. I am proud of my Army and its men. I am proud to serve my country." Well, let me just say, Wade, America is proud of you and is grateful to every soldier, sailor, Marine, and airman serving the cause of peace in the Persian Gulf. I also want to thank the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Powell, the chiefs here tonight, our commander in the Persian Gulf, General Schwarzkopf, and the men and women of the Department of Defense. What a magnificent job you all are doing, and thank you very, very much from the grateful people. I wish I could say that their work is done, but we all know it's not. So if there ever was a time to put country before self and patriotism before party, the time is now. And let me thank all Americans, especially those here in this chamber tonight, for your support for our armed forces and for their mission. That support will be even more important in the days to come. So tonight, I want to talk to you about what's at stake what we must do together to defend civilized values around the world and maintain our economic strength at home. Our objectives in the Persian Gulf are clear, our goals defined and familiar. Iraq must withdraw from Kuwait completely, immediately, and without condition. Kuwait's legitimate government must be restored. The security and stability of the Persian Gulf must be assured, and American citizens abroad must be protected. These goals are not ours alone. They've been endorsed by the United Nations Security Council 5 times in as many weeks. Most countries share our concern for principle, and many have a stake in the stability of the Persian Gulf. This is not, as Saddam Hussein would have it, the United States against Iraq. It is Iraq against the world. And you know, I've just returned from a very productive meeting with Soviet President Gorbachev, and I am pleased that we are working together to build a new relationship. In Helsinki, our joint statement affirmed to the world our shared resolve to counter Iraq's threat to peace. Let me quote, "We are united in the belief that Iraq's aggression must not be tolerated. No peaceful international order is possible if larger states can devour their smaller neighbors. Clearly, no longer can a dictator count on East-West confrontation to stymie concerted United Nations action against aggression." A new partnership of nations has begun, and we stand today at a unique and extraordinary moment. The crisis in the Persian Gulf, as grave as it is, also offers a rare opportunity to move toward an historic period of cooperation. Out of these troubled times, our 5th objective, a new world order, can emerge, a new era, freer from the threat of terror, stronger in the pursuit of justice, and more secure in the quest for peace. An era in which the nations of the world, East and West, North and South, can prosper and live in harmony. 100 generations have searched for this elusive path to peace, while 1,000 wars raged across the span of human endeavor. And today that new world is struggling to be born. A world quite different from the one we've known. A world where the rule of law supplants the rule of the jungle. A world in which nations recognize the shared responsibility for freedom and justice. A world where the strong respect the rights of the weak. This is the vision that I shared with President Gorbachev in Helsinki. He and other leaders from Europe, the Gulf, and around the world understand that how we manage this crisis today could shape the future for generations to come. The test we face is great, and so are the stakes. This is the first assault on the new world that we see, the first test of our mettle. Had we not responded to this first provocation with clarity of purpose, if we do not continue to demonstrate our determination, it would be a signal to actual and potential despots around the world. America and the world must defend common vital interest, and we will. America America and the world must support the rule of law, and we will. America and the world must stand up to aggression, and we will. And one thing more, in the pursuit of these goals, America will not be intimidated. Vital issues, principle are at stake. Saddam Hussein is literally trying to wipe a country off the face of the earth. We do not exaggerate, nor do we exaggerate when we say Saddam Hussein will fail. Vital economic interests are at risk as well. Iraq itself controls some 10% of the world's proven oil reserves. Iraq plus Kuwait controls twice that. In Iraq, permitted to swallow Kuwait, would have the economic and military power, as well as the arrogance, to intimidate and coerce its neighbors who control the lion's share of the world's remaining oil reserves. We cannot permit a resource so vital to be dominated by one so ruthless, and we won't. Recent events have surely proven that there is no substitute for American leadership. In the face of tyranny, let no one doubt American credibility and reliability. Let no one doubt our staying power. We will stand by our friends. One way or another, the leader of Iraq must learn this fundamental truth. From the outset, acting hand in hand with others, we've sought to fashion the broadest possible international response to Iraq's aggression. The level of world cooperation and condemnation of Iraq is unprecedented. Armed forces from countries spanning 4 continents are there at the request of King Fahd of Saudi Arabia to deter and, if need be, to defend against attack. Muslims and non-Muslims, Arabs and non-Arabs, soldiers from many nations stand shoulder to shoulder, resolute against Saddam Hussein's ambitions. And we can now point to 5 United Nations Security Council resolutions that condemn Iraq's aggression. They call for Iraq's immediate and unconditional withdrawal, the restoration of Kuwait's legitimate government, and categorically reject Iraq's cynical and self-serving attempt to annex Kuwait. Finally, the United Nations has demanded the release of all foreign nationals held hostage against their will and in contravention of international law. It's a mockery of human decency to call these people guests. They are hostages, and the whole world knows it. Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, a dependable ally, said it all. We do not bargain over hostages. We will not stoop to the level of using human beings as bargaining chips, ever. Of course our hearts go out to the hostages, to their families, but our policy cannot change, and it will not change. America and the world will not be blackmailed by this ruthless policy. We're sight of a United Nations that performs as envisioned by its founders. We owe much to the outstanding leadership of Secretary General Javier Pérez de Cuellar. The United Nations is backing up its words with action. The Security Council has imposed mandatory economic sanctions on Iraq, designed to force Iraq to relinquish the spoils of its illegal conquest. The Security Council has also taken the decisive step of authorizing the use of all means necessary to ensure compliance with these sanctions. Together with our friends and allies, ships of the United States Navy are today patrolling Mideast waters, and they've already intercepted more than 700 ships to enforce the sanctions. 3 regional leaders I spoke with just yesterday told me that these sanctions are working. Iraq is feeling the heat. We continue to hope that Iraq's leaders will recalculate just what their aggression has cost them. They are cut off from world trade, unable to sell their oil, and only a tiny fraction of goods gets through. The communique with President Gorbachev made mention of what happens when the embargo is so effective that children of Iraq literally need milk, or the sick truly need medicine. Then, under strict international supervision that guarantees the proper destination, then food will be permitted. At home, the material cost of our leadership can be steep. And that's why Secretary of State Baker and Treasury Secretary Brady have met with many world leaders to underscore that the burden of this collective effort must be shared, and we're prepared to do our share and more to help carry the load. We insist that others do their share as well. The response of most of our friends and allies has been good. To help defray costs, the leaders of Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, have pledged to provide our deployed troops with all the food and fuel they need. And generous assistance will also be provided to stalwart frontline nations such as Turkey and Egypt. And I'm also heartened to report that this international response extends to the neediest victims of this conflict, those refugees. For our part, we've contributed $28 million for relief efforts, and this is but a portion of what is needed. I commend in particular Saudi Arabia, Japan, and several European nations who have joined us in this purely humanitarian effort. There's an energy-related cost to be borne as well. Oil-producing nations are already replacing lost Iraqi and Kuwaiti output. More than half of what was lost has been made up, and we're getting superb cooperation. If producers, including the United States, continue steps to expand oil and gas production, we can stabilize prices and guarantee against hardship. Additionally, we and several of our allies always have the option to extract oil from our strategic petroleum reserves if conditions warrant. As I've pointed out before, conservation efforts are essential to keep our energy needs as low as possible. And we must then take advantage of our energy sources across the board: coal, natural gas, hydro, and nuclear. Our failure to do these things has made us more dependent on foreign oil than ever before. And finally, let no one even contemplate profiteering from this crisis. We will not have it. I cannot predict just how long it'll take to convince Iraq to withdraw from Kuwait. Sanctions will take time to have their full intended effect. We will continue to review all options with our allies, but let it be clear, we will not let this aggression stand. Our interests our involvement in the Gulf is not transitory. It predated Saddam Hussein's aggression and will survive it. Long after all our troops come home, and we all hope it's soon, very soon, there will be a lasting role for the United States in assisting the nations of the Persian Gulf. Our role then, to deter future aggression. Our role is to help our friends in their own self-defense, and something else, to curb the proliferation of chemical, biological, ballistic missile, and above all, nuclear technologies. And let me also make clear that the United States has no quarrel with the Iraqi people. Our quarrel is with Iraq's dictator and with his aggression. Iraq will not be permitted to annex Kuwait. And that's not a threat, not a boast, it's just the way it's going to be. Our ability to function effectively as a great power abroad depends on how we conduct ourselves at home. Our economy, our armed forces, our energy dependence, and our cohesion all determine whether we can help our friends and stand up to our foes. For America to lead, America must remain strong and vital. Our world leadership and domestic strength are mutual and reinforcing. A woven piece, strongly bound as old glory. To revitalize our leadership capacity, we must address our budget deficit, not after Election Day or next year, but now. Higher oil prices slow our growth, and higher defense costs would only make our fiscal deficit problem worse. That deficit was already greater than it should have been, a projected $232 billion for the coming year. It will be reduced. To my friends in Congress, together we must act this very month, before the next fiscal year begins on October 1st, to get America's economic house in order. The Gulf situation helps us realize we are more economically vulnerable than we ever should be. Americans must never again enter any crisis, economic or military, with an excessive dependence on foreign oil and an excessive burden of federal debt. Most Americans are sick and tired of endless battles in the Congress and between the branches over budget matters. It is high time we pull together and get the job done right. And it's up to us to straighten this out. And the job has four basic parts. First, the Congress should this month, within a budget agreement, enact growth-oriented tax measures to help avoid recession in the short term and to increase savings, investment, productivity, and competitiveness for the longer term. These measures include extending incentives for research and experimentation, expanding the use of IRAs for new homeowners, establishing tax-deferred family savings accounts, creating incentives for the creation of enterprise zones, and initiatives to encourage more domestic drilling, and yes, reducing the tax rate on capital gains. Second, Congress should this month enact a prudent multi-year defense program, one that reflects not only the improvement in East-West relations, but our broader responsibilities to deal with the continuing risks of outlaw action and regional conflict, even with our obligations in the Gulf. A sound defense budget can have some reduction in real terms, and we are prepared to accept that. But to go beyond such levels, where cutting defense would threaten our vital margin of safety, is something I will never accept. The world is still dangerous, and surely that is now clear. Stability is not secure. American interests are far-reaching. Interdependence has increased. The consequences of regional instability can be global. This is no time to risk America's capacity to protect her vital interests. And third, the Congress should this month enact measures to increase domestic energy production and energy conservation in order to reduce dependence on foreign oil. These measures should include my proposals to increase incentives for domestic oil and gas exploration, fuel switching, and to accelerate the development of the Alaskan energy resources without damage to wildlife. As you know, when the oil embargo was imposed in the early 1970s, the United States imported almost 6 million barrels of oil a day. This year, before the Iraqi invasion, U.S. imports had risen to nearly 8 million barrels per day, and we'd moved in the wrong direction. And now we must act to correct that trend. And fourth, the Congress should this month enact a 5-year program to reduce the projected debt and deficits by $500 billion. That's by $500 billion. And if, with the Congress, we can develop a satisfactory program by the end of the month, we can avoid the acts of sequester, deep, across-the-board cuts that would threaten our military capacity and risk substantial domestic disruption. I want to be able to tell the American people that we have truly solved the deficit problem. And for me to do that, a budget agreement must meet these tests. It must include the measures I've recommended to increase economic growth and reduce dependence on foreign oil. It must be fair. All should contribute, but the burden should not be excessive for any one group or of programs or people. It must address the growth of government's hidden liabilities. It must reform the budget process, and further, it must be real. I urge Congress to provide a comprehensive 5-year deficit reduction program to me as a complete legislative package with measures to assure that it can be fully enforced. America is tired of phony deficit reduction or promise now, save later plans. It is time for program that is credible and real. And finally, to the extent that the deficit reduction program includes new revenue measures, it must avoid any measure that would threaten economic growth or turn us back towards the days of punishing income tax rates. And that is one path we should not head down again. I have been pleased with recent progress, although it's not always seemed so smooth. But now it's time to produce, and I hope we can work out a responsible plan. But with or without agreement from the budget summit, I ask both houses of the Congress to allow a straight up or down vote on a complete $500 billion deficit reduction package not later than September 28th. And if the Congress cannot get me a budget, then Americans will have to face a tough, mandated sequester. I'm hopeful, in fact, I'm confident that the Congress will do what it should, and I can assure you that we, in the executive branch, will do our part. In the final analysis, our ability to meet our responsibilities abroad depends upon political will and consensus at home. It's never easy in democracies, where we govern only with the consent of the governed. And although free people in a free society are bound to have their differences, Americans traditionally come together in times of adversity and challenge. Once again, Americans have stepped forward to share a tearful goodbye with their families before leaving for a strange and distant shore. At this very moment, they serve together, Arabs, Europeans, Asians, Africans, in defense of principle and the dream of a new world order. And that's why they sweat and toil in the sand and heat in the sun. And if they can come together under such adversity, if old adversaries like the Soviet Union and the United States can work in common cause, then surely we, who were so fortunate to be in this great chamber, Democrats, Republicans, liberals, conservatives, can come together to fulfill our responsibilities here. Thank you, good night, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you all very much.
live picture of the House floor where the President just finished his address to the nation. And we're awaiting the Democratic response by House Majority Leader Richard Gephardt, expected momentarily in a minute or two. Following his address, which will not be before an audience, which means there will be no interruption for applause, we will come back to our studios and open the phones up to get your response to the President's address and then Mr. Gephardt's remarks. Congressman Gephardt is expected to speak for approximately 10 minutes. It's the third time in his presidency that the President has been to this chamber to address the nation, once with a budget message early in his term in 1989, then a State of the Union message earlier this year, and now this special address about the situation in the Gulf. Members of the Senate and the House filing out of the House chamber. Tonight's session do not include, by the way, the Supreme Court of the United States. We'll see them when the President addresses the group in the State of the Union message. Again, open phones here on C-SPAN following Congressman Dick Gephardt's Democratic response. He, by the way, is located off the floor of the House in the House of Representatives clerk's office. Clerk of the House, Ron Anderson, by name, has an office right down the hallway from what you're looking at on your screen. Gephardt has been mic'd and will soon be addressing the nation with the Democratic response. Then following his address, open phones here on C-SPAN for a considerable amount of time, up to around 11 o'clock this evening. Included in that time will be some of the responses from members of the House and Senate who will be joining us from Statuary Hall, which is, again, right outside this room. President George Bush addressing the nation.
Two houses now dissolved.